Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this free webinar entitled It All Starts with the Story. It's a fundraising bootcamp. It's part of a series that we're doing at Life Science Nation. My name is Greg Mannix. I'm in charge of international BD, that's outside of the US, and general manager for Europe at LSN. And I've been with the company for about 6 years now. I'm joined today by my colleague, Alexander Vassallo. Do you want to introduce yourself, Alex?
Hello, everyone. I'm the BD manager for the West Coast at LSN, and I'm also the lead of our new entrepreneurial education program. I'm one of the newer members of the company. 10 months ago, actually, I joined, but it's a delight to be speaking with all of you today.
Super. So today's webinar, It All Starts with the Story, is a brand new, it's brand new content. This is the first time we're offering it in this webinar format, and I hope you all find it useful and interesting. So just a brief introduction to Life Science Nation. Life Science Nation has been around for about 10 years, and we started as a data company. We have two databases. One is an investor database that tracks several thousand life science investment firms and about 10,000 actual investors. It's a really powerful tool for fundraising companies to identify investors who are a fit for them and have all of the tools and information they need to be able to reach out and begin that communication. The business development database tracks over 60,000 emerging companies in the life sciences all over the world. It has some really unique databases within the database that include licensing deals, clinical trials, funding rounds, and management teams and things like that. So it's a really powerful tool as well. It's used by some biotech companies for market intelligence. It's used by a lot of big pharma companies, also CROs and other service providers use it for business development. So it's also a very unique database of the life sciences industry. We have an accelerator program that we call Focus on Cures, and it includes basically two main elements. We help companies with their branding and messaging. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about today in today's talk about learning to tell your story has to do with branding and messaging of your company, of your startup. And we also do fundraising workshops, both in person and online, all over the world. We've been basically all over Europe, Asia, and North America, and even South America, doing fundraising workshops. And that kind of leads into the Global Roadshow Prep Course, which is a series of educational programs that we've developed for groups of companies, sometimes from a geographical area, or sometimes from a major funding source who want to put companies through this program to help them get ready for fundraising and help them be more successful. So those can range from a half a day to 3 full days, and we can be very flexible on how that works. Probably our most visible activity and what we're most well known for is the Redefining Early Stage Investments or RESI conference, which we do 5 times a year. We have done them all over the world the year before the pandemic. And then, of course, we had to switch to virtual conferences, which has gone really well. And our conferences have been really successful in helping people connect and do business despite being, on lockdown in their homes. It's been great. But this year, after having 3 digital conferences, we're finally having an in-person conference that will be hybrid. So it'll be 2 days in person, 1 day virtual. The in-person will be in Boston, We have been doing a conference in Boston every year since we began the Resi conference 10 years ago. And our Boston conference is always a fantastic conference because, as you all know, Boston is a huge hub for the life sciences and for investors in the life sciences. And that always makes for a great conference. And people come from all over the world to our Boston conference, investors, companies, service providers. It will be really a great conference, and we're all really excited to be back in person. We will have another digital conference in November, which in future years will be an international conference, the one in November, either in Europe or in Asia. Okay, so that's an intro to Life Science Nation. Let's get right into today's subject. So what we're going to talk about today is the importance of knowing how to tell your story. So to be successful in business and in many other things in life, I would say, you have to get your story straight. And getting your story straight means you really understand how to tell your story so that you can be effective with whoever it is you're talking to. And that's what we're going to talk about today. It's about getting your story straight. It's about being effective in telling your story. And it's about the different tools that you can use to improve your story and to improve your chances of partnering with investors, strategics, and other important players in the industry who will help move your business forward. So to start with, I want to tell you a little story that our CEO and founder, Dennis Ford, who used to teach a course at UMass Boston on entrepreneurship. And there's something that he always used to ask his class, the first day of class, when they were just getting started, he would say, "Hey, how many of you would jump out of an airplane without a parachute?" And there would always be, a couple of people who would raise their hand. And jokingly, Dennis would say, "Okay, you two can stay. The rest of you have to leave because you're not ready to be entrepreneurs." So, it's an amusing story, but there's a lot of truth to it. To be an entrepreneur, you have to be willing to take the risk and understand that a lot of early stage companies fail. So, if you're willing to take that risk and you're willing to, give it your all to make your company a success, then you're ready to be an entrepreneur. And as I said earlier, if you learn how to tell your story effectively, that is really going to make a huge difference. It's a must if you want to grow your company and grow those connections. So there's a fun fact that the most successful entrepreneurs, and if you look in any industry, the most successful guys out there, they all are the best storytellers. And you can see that if you look them up on YouTube, or maybe they do TED Talks, you'll see that successful entrepreneurs they have a quality. They all have something in common, and that is they're really good storytellers. So you have to focus on two things when you're getting started as an entrepreneur. You have to find your own voice, and you have to start telling your story. You have to start telling it to everyone who wants to listen. And this will allow you to become a natural storyteller so that you won't even have to think about it, because you'll have practiced enough and you will have perfected your story to the point where it just comes naturally. So, this is the goal. And this is something you have to do. And it starts with finding your own voice. And sometimes it's really difficult because not everyone is experienced in telling stories about your business and about what you're doing. You may find this daunting if you're coming out of an academic environment or some other role, or and this is your first time as an entrepreneur, which is the case with many of the people who come through the Resi conference. They're entrepreneurs for the first time, and they're just starting to try to connect with investors and different partners. So how do you overcome that trepidation about talking to people, telling your story, being open and transparent about what you're doing, but also compelling? And the answer is, it's by doing it over and over and over again. It's practicing. So never think that your elevator pitch or your the way you tell your story, even your tagline, never think that it's a finished product, because as you go through the motions of meeting investors and having meetings with strategic partners, investors, etc., you'll find that you will need to refine and improve your message, and it will always be evolving, I think. And you want it to be authentic. So you want to be yourself, and it's often useful to incorporate personal stories into your story, which might not come naturally to some people who are from a culture where that's maybe looked down upon or not as accepted as it might be in the US or maybe some places in Europe. But just an example, a friend of mine, Ricardo Garcia, he is a fantastic storyteller, and he's a successful entrepreneur. He's raised money for his startup company. And one of the reasons he is so convincing and so compelling when he tells his story is that he brings in his personal experience of dealing with childhood cancer. He has a son who went through a rare form of brain cancer and had a poor outlook at one point. And thankfully, he was able to get treatment, and his son was fine. But Ricardo decided at that point that he was going to dedicate his life to childhood cancer. And he started a biotech company specifically focused on childhood cancer. It's the only biotech company developing drugs specifically for childhood cancer and exclusively for childhood cancer. And when he tells his story, it's very compelling, because he and his co-founder both were fathers of kids with cancer. And he makes a very compelling story about the importance of developing drugs specifically for children, because it hasn't been the case in the past. And you can imagine how compelling it is to incorporate your own personal experience as compared to, and I see this a lot when companies tell me about what they're doing. If the conversation started, yes, I have a biotech company, we're developing a small molecule for childhood cancer, and jump directly into the science behind the molecule that they're developing. So what is going to connect better with the person you're speaking to? Probably the personal story. To get them hooked on your what you're telling them, to get them hooked on your story. So if you incorporate that personal experience, you probably will catch their attention. You'll have a better chance of getting their full attention And then, depending on how much time you have, and we'll talk about this in a second, you can go through the different aspects of your company, and all of the value propositions and all of the selling points that you want to communicate to the person you're speaking to. But in terms of catching their attention, being your authentic self is what will most likely connect with the person you're talking to. And that brings us to the battle with balancing authenticity. And this is a very common situation that we see at Life Science Nation and at the Resi conference. We call it the expert's conundrum, where someone is almost too authentic in their expertise to be able to connect with a wide range of people. So, what I'm referring to an entrepreneur who is a domain expert in a particular silo, probably some kind of science or engineering, or if it's a medical device or a therapeutic or whatever. The entrepreneur is very likely an expert in something very, very focused. He or she has their area of expertise. But in order to be successful as a communicator and to be successful in telling your story, you really need to widen your scope and get out of your silo. And I see this very, very frequently, where people start telling me about what they're developing, and it's not effective because they jump right into the technical and the science behind their technology before knowing what my background is. Personally, I don't have a science background. I have a business background, and they make that mistake of jumping right into the science and just assuming that I will understand everything they're talking about, and it's often not the case. And that's a mistake that I think many first-time entrepreneurs who come from a science background make. When you're speaking to another person, it could be an investor, could be an advisor, could be a strategic partner. Don't assume that everyone has the same background that you do, because most of them won't. Okay, and you need to build your story, and you have a story that you're starting off with, and you will be continually refining that story and adding the really key aspects of your company and what you want to communicate to the other person. And sometimes you'll have 1 minute to explain what you're doing, and sometimes you'll have an hour to, when you're meeting with someone, and you'll be able to go into more detail. But you want to build that story so that it's completely bulletproof. You have all of the key information, and you're very confident and sure of yourself in communicating things like, what is your technology and how does it work? What's the value proposition? What are the milestones you're working to reach? Who's on your team? What's your intellectual property? And what are you asking for? How much money are you raising? How much money have you raised, and where has that come from? And I think it's really important, as we said earlier, to explain to people how you got to where you are. Where are you coming from? How did you get there? What drives you? What motivates you? And you need to get all of that into your story in a coherent way that you can do in 1 minute, or 5 minutes, or a half an hour, or depending on the situation, however long that might be. And if you can do that, you will be very, very convincing to the person you're talking to. and they will see that you are you're sure of yourself. You have a deep understanding of your company and what your challenges are and how you're going to meet them. You will give that positive impression. Which brings us to this concept called entrepreneurial agency. This is a concept that our CEO, Dennis Ford, talks about extensively in a book he's writing. And it's something that's difficult to explain, but you can tell when a successful entrepreneur speaks. You can tell that they have it. And by having it, I mean that you can see that there is a presence, they have a confidence about them, self-assuredness about what they're saying. And you hear this often when you're listening to a famous entrepreneur, business person, athlete, someone from the arts, an actor or actress. You can tell who has this agency, this entrepreneurial agency. And it has to do with coming across as a leader, someone who is convinced of what you're saying, someone who is just very, very confident and projects this this force of nature. This is a person who is a force of nature. So you need to think about how are you going to tell your story in such a way that you will be the force of nature for your company moving forward. And at that point, I would like to pass the mic virtually over to Alex to continue.
Thank you very much, Greg. And if anyone does have any questions as we move throughout the next slides, pop them in the Q&A box and we'll answer them for you. So irrespective of whether this is your first venture potentially or your second, third, fourth venture, when you are bridging that gap from the academic environment to the startup and business development world, you need to be able to tell this company story through a consistent and cogent set of marketing materials. These are commonly also referred to as non-confidential materials, and there's a variety of these materials. So you have your tagline to start off with. This is your company identity distilled into roughly 5 to 7 words. When you are sending an email to an investor or meeting someone at a conference or a social event, and they have a look at your tear sheet or your executive summary, or they hear you say your tagline, they should be able to know exactly what it is you're doing just from those few words and be able to determine, right, are we interested in learning more? That moves on into the elevator pitch, which is roughly 5 to 7 sentences. Normally takes about anywhere between 30 and 60 seconds. This is an extremely important thing to have in your game plan, because when you are bumping into someone at a conference, for example, and everyone is exchanging business cards, you don't have typically, unless it's a planned meeting, 5, 10, 15 minutes to really go over all of your company's unique value points, like the market and the mechanism of action of your therapy or diagnostic, your route to market. You only really have potentially 30 to 60 seconds to grip their attention and make them think to themselves, let's actually take another meeting with these guys. Let's learn a little more. And then building on from that, you have the one pager and the executive summary. Now, the one pager is also known as a tear sheet or a data sheet. This contains a bulleted format of your executive summary, your market opportunities, any technical milestones that you may have achieved, who's on your board, are there any key opinion leaders, current funding, past funding. This is a really valuable resource to have, and we can actually send a template of the one pager to everyone after this presentation, because a lot of the feedback that we've gotten from investors is that they like to see the one pager, as you can synthesize the key value points of a company in roughly 5 to 10 minutes. The executive summary, this is a longer document, typically about 2 pages long. And this is more of a deep dive into the history of your company, your team, why it is you are doing, what you are hoping to achieve. And you're able to speak at greater depth, still being non-confidential, but you're able to speak at greater depth about your technology and about your unique company. And then finally, this transitions into the slide deck. Your pitch deck should be roughly 10 to 12 slides as an intro deck to investors. And you can use your executive summary as the first half of the pitch deck and include, for example, some of your IP. You can include the market. You can include the problem you're trying to solve and the solution you will hopefully be developing and implementing to solve that problem, whatever your unique hook is compared to your competitors. And then as you move on to the second portion of the deck, it can contain maybe a little bit more information on your technology, a timeline with key milestones, what your ask is, what your use of funds are, or what you expect your use of funds to be. And, for example, do you have an exit strategy? All of these other things can be included into your pitch deck. And we do recommend for intros, it only be 10 to 12 slides, because as you move down the deal chain, which I will cover later in this presentation, you will be able to deliver more advanced, scientifically advanced pitch decks to the players in the deal chain. Next slide, Greg. Brilliant. And so a really important reason why you need to be developing not only just an executive summary or a pitch deck, but the one pager as well, is because all of the investors and partners who you may be speaking with, they're all different. And some investors may, for example, want to look just at a pitch deck. Me personally, I'm more of a pitch deck person. I prefer to read that than an executive summary. Others may prefer to look at your executive summary and the one pager. The founder and CEO of Life Science Nation, Dennis Ford, he would much prefer to read the executive summary, which is more of a deep dive. And some partners may prefer to look at all 3 of these resources, for example. But if each piece of marketing collateral, if all of these non-confidential materials tell a consistent story of your company, and when you get your story straight and you are telling this consistent story in these materials and you are giving them to a partner who is a right fit, be it via an email or a conference, you should be able to get a meeting. You should be able to grip and hook their attention and hopefully use that as a platform to establish dialogue with the partner, to build that carefully into a relationship. And then hopefully 9 to 18 months down the line, have that transcend into a deliverable, be it a partnership, a collaboration, or even an allocation. And so when you find your voice and you are really able to net out your unique company value and get your story straight and deliver it all the way through your tagline, elevator pitch, all the way through to the pitch deck. This is really important for developing your narrative, the narrative of your firm, for the different players who you will meet in the context of a deal. And to do this, you need to be multilingual. By that, we don't mean you need to be able to speak, French, Spanish, or German, for example. We mean you need to be able to speak the different languages within the context of a deal. So when you attend a conference like Resi, for example, many of the investors or partners who you might meet with, they will be gatekeepers. They will know what the investment firm is looking for, but they will not necessarily be an expert in the nuances of your technology or the end product. They're there to vet opportunities. So when you're speaking to them about your company, about your science, you should be a little bit more general. If you are developing a novel CAR T-cell immunotherapy for an autoimmune indication, but you're using multiple 4th generation constructs, for example, don't go into all of the depth on the new constructs and specifically how you might manufacture these cells. For example, that's a little bit too technical. Just be a little bit more general. we're developing a novel cellular immunotherapy for autoimmune indications or your specific disease area. When you are passed from the gatekeeper to the navigator, who is the next person you will traditionally meet down the deal chain, they will be the BD person of the investment firm or the partnering firm, and they will understand a little bit more specifically the configuration of the technology that the firm is looking for. With the navigator, you can get a little bit more technical. You might have a pitch deck that is slightly longer, which contains a lot more data, for example, more on your mechanism of action. And with them, you can speak a little bit more technical. So if you were going to produce allogeneic CAR T cells so that you could scale manufacturing and make sure that everyone in the world could have access or could be treated with these cells, just irrespective of what source they come from, with that person, you can go a little bit more in detail. After the navigator, you'll then most likely be passed down to the evaluator. This person will own the project being the due diligence of your firm and really kind of understanding more and about the investment opportunity. They will most likely have a PhD. They will have a lot of advanced scientific knowledge. So at this point in time, you can get into a lot of depth about all of the different molecular mechanisms of transforming the cells in your therapy, all of the nuanced and niche points. You can get in, you can speak that language, the advanced scientific language, to them, because they will be able to understand it. And then finally, you will come across the decision maker. This is likely someone or a couple of people who will be doing, they will do the deal with you. They will be the business person. They will be really focused on the financials, the ROI, the ability for your technology to scale, the market that you're hoping to enter, or the penetrance. Do you have any financial models or business models? Those are also important elements that will come up in the conversations before that. It's not like you'll get to the decision maker and all of a sudden start talking about business. Business will be brought up before that in your conversations. But when you do get to the decision maker, the language that will be required will be much more focused on the business elements of your value proposition. At that point in time, the science has been vetted. You've been able to wow the gatekeeper, the navigator, the evaluator with your unique technology, your unique product for your company. And now you'll be speaking business to the decision maker. And so there are some language tools that you can use to help refine your hook, to get you that first meeting with investors, to push that on to a second meeting. And whilst you can hire or work with a marketer, and some successful marketers, they charge a lot of money for their skills with language. Here are some tips that you can do before spending the money on the professional that may be of some benefit to you. So comparisons, these can help lock into your story and your company's core value and simplify a conversation around context. So for example, just as Novartis's T-cell immunotherapy revolutionized the treatment of glioblastoma, our new cell therapy will aim to transform the standard of care of leukemia. Another great language tool that you can use are metaphors, similes, drawing a link between something literal, i.e. your product, your technology, that maybe the gatekeeper doesn't quite understand yet, and a figurative thing that they would be able to understand. So an example would be, our new treatment is like a key that will unlock the genetic door to juvenile diabetes. We will be able to open and reprogram the disease-causing genes, which will hopefully delay or even prevent the onset of the disease. Here, the gene therapy is the literal thing. The key and the doors, those are figurative things, and they create a powerful image in your listeners' minds to help them understand the value of what you are proposing. Parallels can also be really useful, drawing a line between your company and a well-known product or service. The goal for our therapy is to be as effective in the modulation of autoimmune diseases as aspirin is in the alleviation of a headache. There are definitely better examples that you can use, but that's just a rough one. And then finally, aphorisms. I was drawn to this area. I was always curious about something. I had an epiphany about something. All of these examples are meant to engage, set up, and draw your audience into your own personal narrative. And these are natural ways to get their attention, allow them to relate to you, and compel them to either take a meeting, take more meetings, and learn more about your technology and your company. One thing though, before we move on to the next slide, do take care with aphorisms because they can become tiresome to a potential partner or investor who has heard a lot of them before. And if you use too many of them in the same pitch, they might get a little bit tired of that. And so, as you are developing your narrative, as you are building your company story and finding your voice, you will ultimately be finessing your story. This is an ongoing process. It is very difficult. You're not going to be expected to get it right away. You will finesse your story through weeks, if not months, of practicing it to yourself, delivering it to both colleagues, friends, families, your BD regional manager at Life Science Nation. We can help with this. And when you are able to finesse your story, you can draw the straightest line between A and B and present your unique technology in a way that makes it very easy for new investors and partners to understand what it is your unique value points are. Now, when you're doing this, it's important not to overinflate your product's value. I spoke to a company a few months ago developing a pretty cool diagnostic technology for oncology. And the entrepreneur the entire time couldn't stop telling me about how it was going to completely dominate the market. Sure, your technology probably is going to be brilliant, but there's also a dozen or 24 other companies in the world doing something pretty similar. So try not to overinflate your product to make it sound too good to be true. And that being said, don't underestimate the value of what you could be doing with your technology. Dennis and I met with a company who was developing an amazing therapy for a pediatric skin condition. And when they were telling us a little bit more about their company, there was a couple of different elements that they didn't include in their elevator pitch, but these were really, this was cracking stuff. And we said to them, guys, you need to put this in your elevator pitch. This needs to become part of your story. This is a unique value point. So, whether or not your innovation is iterative or it is a genuine breakthrough technology, if you are forthright about your company's core value and you don't overinflate the value, but try not to underestimate it, this will be really essential when getting meetings with partners and establishing dialogue and building relationships. And don't worry if you don't get it right away, because it is very difficult. It does take time, but practicing it and delivering it to other people is probably one of the best ways to finesse your story. And then finally, before we finish up, something that we have learned at LSN over the past 10 years is that investors will always bet on the team. Your unique technology, the market size, this unmet medical need you are addressing, these are all really important points that will ultimately end up being factors that determine whether an allocation is made. But before an investor signs a co-development contract, before they agree to a distribution arrangement, for example, they need to be assured that they will be betting on a augmenting and complementary and driven team. When you are meeting an investor or a partner at a conference, during a meeting, and they can see that the members of your team are not only behind you and that they believe in your vision, but they can also share your company story, they will be inspired to work with you. There are few things more powerful than going to an investor conference like Resi, for example. You bring your CEO, your CBO, your CSO, and each person can deliver the same compelling elevator pitch. Each person knows all of the unique value points of your company and they are behind your leader. This is an excellent position to be in. and it is extremely valuable. Do not underestimate the value of having a team behind you. And this is also really important because when an allocation or a partnership is made, for example, this will be a partnership that can potentially last 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. It's commonly referred to as marrying an investor or getting into bed with them. And believe me when I say, if you do not have a team that is behind you, if you do not have a team where you have augmenting and complementary skill sets, you will find it the investor will find it very difficult to foresee a profitable relationship that will last 10 to 15 years. And this also goes on as we go back to in-person conferences. This also relates to Zoom meetings and online meetings. When you are taking meetings with investors and potential partners, make sure that whoever is on the call has their screens turned on, that they say hello to an investor, that they introduce themselves, that they ask questions as well, because there is nothing less impressive to an investor or a potential partner if they take a meeting in person or online and one person who attends doesn't say anything, doesn't introduce themselves. Remember, the investors are betting on the team, so it's really important to show that everyone on your team shares your company vision. And with that, I believe we come to the end of our presentation. So if anyone has any further questions or would like to learn more about our LSN investor database or Resi, feel free to email resi@lifesciencenation.com and we will get back to you. The slides and our one-page datasheet template will be sent to everyone after this so that you can create your own template and that you can review the slides. And it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you all today. Now, there were a few questions.
We do actually have a few questions, Alex.
Right. So before I did see the Q&A box. We want to make sure that we answer them. Anonymous attendee, how many meetings can I expect at a Resi conference? That is that's a tough question to ask because it is variable on and is dependent on many different factors. The more work you put in to your partnering efforts, the more time you spend on your company story, the more time you spend on your non-confidential materials, the more time you spend practicing your elevator pitch to your colleagues, to your LSN BD manager, the more you will get out of the conference. Normally what we see is when an attendee puts a lot of time and effort into their partnering journey, they can easily get 15, 20, 25 meetings. That is not too far of a reach. We've had companies at our last conference in June get 30+ meetings.
Yep.
Sorry, do you want to take the next one, Greg?
I would just add, Alex, that in our digital conferences, the format is three days of partnering. And in our upcoming in-person conference, there are 2 days of in-person partnering going on all day long for 2 days, and then a full 24 hours of digital partnering. So yeah, there are definitely opportunities to get, up to 20, 25 meetings. And we've seen that with companies that were really diligent, like Alex said.
Yeah.
So about having a conversation or jumping right into a PowerPoint at the Resi conference. In my experience, I've spoken to a lot of companies that found it was really useful to begin a conversation without jumping right into your PowerPoint and just getting to, having the chance to get to know each other, you and the investor. And if someone else on your team is there, as Alex mentioned, the worst thing you can do is have someone in the meeting who doesn't participate at all. It's that gives a poor impression. So starting with the conversation and getting to know each other, I think is the best way to start. And then just, kind of judging by how things go, and the investor may say, well, do you have a PowerPoint to show me? Just kind of play it by ear. I don't know, what's your take on that, Alex?
So I would say when you're meeting an investor at a meeting at Resi, for example, it definitely helps to have your laptop on you. So you do have a PowerPoint at least to refer to. You have a 30-minute meeting with the investor. And so it probably is better if you open with an elevator pitch and make sure to ask them questions as well and establish more of a conversation with the investor and have lots of slides as a reference. But that being said, there may be some investors who might want to have maybe a 3 or 4 minute pitch, in which case having your slideshow ready is really useful. The bottom line is definitely have slides ready and open, so that if they ask about your market or your timeline or your milestones or your ask, you have a point of reference which you can immediately go to. But it's always better, I think, at least in my opinion, from what I've seen and the feedback I've gotten from my companies, to use the slides as a reference, but have the conversation be a little bit more open with the investor. Get a cracking elevator pitch in at the start and allow that to establish a dialogue, I think would be really useful. But we do actually have, just to add to that, we do have partnering tutorials in the build up to our Resi conference. They will be listed on the website, and they will also be mentioned in our newsletter. We will be doing partnering tutorials in the build up to Resi Boston, and attending these can be really useful because you can ask these questions. We'll be covering these points in a lot more depth to make sure that if you're attending Resi Boston, you are getting absolutely the most benefit if the time permits. Yeah.
Okay, there's a question about the ratio of CEOs to investors at a Resi conference. And I would say that what's unique about the Resi conference is that we have about a 1-to-1 ratio of investors to CEOs. We get a very large turnout of investors at the Resi conference because of the fact that we've been curating this database of investors for all these years, and we've been running the Resi conference for also nearly 10 years. And we just have a really robust network of investors that come to our conferences. So we get a very good turnout. Usually 300 to 400 investors will participate at our conferences. How can we get a copy of Dennis's book? You want to take that one, Alex?
Absolutely. So we can include it in the follow-up message that Zoom will send out after this webinar, so that there's a link to Dennis's book. And for whatever reason anyone doesn't receive it, you should email Resi at Life Science Nation, and we'll send over a copy to you. And then the final question was, do you have a workshop on how to book meetings? Our partnering tutorials. We will be doing those closer to the Resi conference, but we will be hosting at least 2 of them. Watch out, you'll be able to register for them through our website, but we will be definitely doing tutorials on how to book meetings. So that definitely will be covered. James, I do see that you've got something in the chat box, so we can answer that. But while we still have time, we actually we timed out this presentation to last an entire hour. But we actually do have another 10 minutes before that. Greg, do you think it might be worth doing a quick demo for everyone of the database, just so they can see, in addition to what we can offer to the Resi conference?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thanks for all your great questions. We really appreciate the participation of the audience. So as I mentioned at the beginning, at LSN, we have been curating this database of investors, and that is the force behind the Resi conference. It's having this extensive database of about 3,000 investment firms and over 10,000 investors in the firm. It's a global database with investors literally from all over the world, focused mainly on Europe, North America, and Asia. There are some investors from other places as well. And very importantly, we don't just track VCs. VCs are not the only investment opportunity for life science companies. There are many types of investors, and we're actually tracking 10 categories of investors. So, angels, corporate VCs, foundations, family offices have become very active now in early stage investment. And we've also seen a big shift in the engagement of big pharma and big biotech companies in the early stages. So, apart from having many VCs and many angel groups and other types of investors. We're also tracking the other categories that are relevant to early stage investor, early stage funding. So the key issue or the key, I think, advantage of using the LSN database when you're looking to create a global target list of investors is that you can filter for investors that are a fit for your technology, your stage of development, and your geographic location. So I think one of the most inefficient aspects of fundraising is not knowing who to reach out to, and reaching out to any and every investor that you can get a contact email for, without knowing if that investor is at all interested in your type of technology. And investors have told me that that's the most frustrating part of their job, is when they get contacted by companies who haven't done their research, haven't done their homework to see if it's a good fit. So for the Life Science Nation database, you can choose a main sector. So say, just as an example, say therapeutics. You can pick a subsector, small molecules, and you can also select any indication area, and very importantly, the stage of development. So many of the companies we see are early stage, so they're like preclinical going into phase 1, and you can also select a geographic area, so that investors who are have a focus on a specific area, let's just say US for now as an example, and we can run a search. So these investors, over 500 investors come up that meet those criteria and would be interested in a company developing a small molecule for cardiovascular disease in early stage, phase preclinical to phase 1. And you'll see that there are different types of investors. Like, here's a VC from California, another VC from the US that's based in China. Here's a VC in China, a VC in the UK.
A lot of VCs in the small molecule space.
And you see angel groups, and you see family offices, and corporate VCs, and foundations. So there are many different types of investors. So if we take a look at the kind of information that we track, Plus ND Capital is based in Silicon Valley. They invest in these different areas. They're opportunistic, so you get some kind of general information. Clicking on the mandate tab gives you more detailed information that's taken in a personal interview with the investor by one of our research analysts at Life Science Nation. So this is a really important difference about our database and the type of information that we offer. It's forward-looking information. It's what the investors say that they are looking to invest in now, how much they invest, et cetera. And you get, really important information for an early stage company. Like, this investor invests seed to Series B, 500K to 5 million per round. They leave money for follow-on investments. That's really important if you're hoping that, this will be an investor for the life of your company. And you can see their geographic focus, US and Europe for this particular one. You get some more detailed information about the types of technologies they're looking for in the stage of development, management team requirements, if any, if they take a board seat, and importantly, you get a message from the investor on how to get in contact with them. So some investors will give you a person to contact. Others prefer to be contacted through Life Science Nation. So in this case, you would write to this address, and we would make the connection for you. And then all of the investor profiles have a contact section with detailed information on how to get in touch with these firms. So the database is, your searches are downloadable. You can save searches and get email alerts when there are new investors added. It's a really powerful tool when you're doing your fundraise, when you can have a target list of hundreds of investors who are fit for what you're developing. So did I cover everything, Alex?
Did you mention that the list can be downloaded into Excel?
It can be downloaded into Excel, which makes it very useful for managing your contacts. We think it's important to use a customer management software, CRM, customer relationship management software, to manage all that communication with hundreds of investors and many contacts. So that's something that we can help with. And I think something important to mention, Alex, is that when someone subscribes to our database, we give them a lot of support. Yes. We have an onboarding session where we will go over how to use the database, strategies for reaching out to investors, information that we think is important to include in your outreach, and how to use the database to determine which investors want to receive. Like Alex said, some like to get a pitch deck, others like to get a pitch deck and an executive summary, some only want executive summary. We give you that information in the database. And then we also will take a look at your marketing collateral and give you our feedback based on our experience of doing this for many years. So, getting the database for a one-year subscription, and we can combine that with a registration at our Resi conference and the opportunity to pitch. These are ways that we can help you really move your fundraising forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth, yeah. I mean, when you subscribe to the database, it's the beginning of a long-term relationship with LSN, the investor research team, your local BD manager. And so we provide a lot of support on, the analysis of your non-confidential materials, getting your story straight, helping to build up your investor message. And we're currently running a bundle on the database, which includes a pitching package to Resi. So if anyone would like any individual demos for their specific list of global partners, just email Resi at Life Science Nation and we will absolutely help you out there.
That's exactly right.
Brilliant. So thank you very much, everyone.
I think we're right at the top of the hour.
We are. And we hope you all have a great rest of your week. And hopefully we'll be seeing all of you in person, if not virtually, this September in Boston at, the Westin and Copley Square. Okay.
Yep. Hope to see you all. Thanks for joining.
Take care, everyone.